Police in central London are investigating the death of a newborn baby after what officers describe as a fall from a residential property in Westminster. The Metropolitan Police say officers were called to Horseferry Road at around 7:30 on Saturday morning, the 14th of March, after reports that a baby had fallen from height. The child, an 18-day-old baby girl, was taken to hospital, where she was later pronounced dead. A 43-year-old woman was arrested at the scene on suspicion of murder and, in the latest public update, remained in police custody. Police say they are treating the case as a murder investigation and believe the incident occurred in what they describe as a domestic context. This is an extremely distressing story, and because it involves the death of a very young child, there are limits to what can responsibly be said at this stage. Much of what happened inside that property is still being established by detectives, forensic teams, and emergency responders. There has been an arrest, but there has not, in the latest public information available, been any announcement of a charge. That means this remains an active investigation, and it is important to distinguish clearly between what police have officially confirmed and what remains unknown. What we know tonight is this. Emergency services were called to an address on Horseferry Road in Westminster on Saturday morning. The Metropolitan Police say the call came after reports that a baby had fallen from a residential property. The London Ambulance Service said the baby was treated at the scene before being taken to a major trauma centre. Despite those efforts, the child died in hospital. A 43-year-old woman was detained at the scene on suspicion of murder. Detectives say urgent inquiries are underway into the circumstances of the death. Police have identified the senior investigating officer as Detective Chief Inspector Alison Foxwell. In a statement released by the Metropolitan Police, she said officers' thoughts were with the baby's family and added that the death of an infant is always an extremely tragic occurrence. She said detectives are making urgent inquiries and, at this stage, believe the incident occurred within a domestic context. Police are also asking anyone who witnessed the incident or who has information that could help to come forward and quote reference 1596/the 14th of March. The location is in the Westminster area of central London, near the junction of Horseferry Road and Great Peter Street. Media reports from the scene on Saturday described a police cordon covering much of Great Peter Street, with forensic officers working in and around a flat in the Peabody estate. Images published by broadcasters showed investigators at a property near that junction as roads around the scene were restricted and passers-by were diverted away from the taped-off area. For viewers joining us who may only just be hearing about this case, there are several points worth keeping in mind. First, an arrest on suspicion of murder is an important step in an investigation, but it is not the same thing as a charge or a conviction. In the British criminal justice system, police may arrest someone while they gather evidence, conduct interviews, and consult with prosecutors. Whether any charge follows depends on the evidence collected and decisions taken later in the process. As of the latest reporting I found, police had not publicly announced any charge in this case. Second, police have deliberately described the circumstances in limited terms. The Met has said only that the baby fell from a residential property and that officers currently believe the incident happened in a domestic context. They have not publicly set out a detailed narrative of what happened before emergency services arrived. They have not, in the official statement I reviewed, identified the precise relationship between the arrested woman and the child. And they have not publicly released details explaining why the arrest was made on suspicion of murder rather than another offence. Those are matters investigators will be examining carefully. Third, because the child was just 18 days old, this is the kind of case that is likely to involve multiple lines of inquiry. Detectives will typically seek to establish a timeline, identify who was present, review any calls made to emergency services, examine the scene in detail, and gather any available witness accounts, CCTV, digital evidence, and medical evidence. In a case involving a child's death, post-mortem and specialist medical findings are likely to be especially important in helping investigators understand the precise circumstances. That broader investigative context is a matter of standard criminal procedure. The specific findings in this case have not yet been made public. The public appeal itself is also significant. Police often issue appeals very early in an investigation when they want to identify anyone who may have seen or heard something unusual around the time of the incident. In this case, the Metropolitan Police have asked for anyone with information to contact them and quote the reference number associated with Saturday's inquiry. That suggests investigators are seeking to piece together the clearest possible picture of events in and around the property on Horseferry Road. At the same time, this is a story that has already attracted intense attention because of the age of the child and the central London location. That makes accuracy especially important. News organisations have a responsibility not to fill in gaps with assumptions. It is very easy, in the early hours of a major police inquiry, for speculation to outpace confirmed information. In this case, the confirmed information remains relatively limited. A baby girl died after a reported fall from a residential property. A woman was arrested on suspicion of murder. Detectives say they believe it happened in a domestic setting, and the investigation is continuing. There is, of course, a wider human reality behind those official lines. The death of any infant is profoundly distressing. Even a short police statement can point to the gravity of the situation. In this case, the Metropolitan Police statement described the incident as an extremely tragic occurrence, and that language reflects the seriousness with which detectives and emergency responders are approaching the case. For people living near the scene in Westminster, the visible police presence, cordons, and forensic activity on Saturday would have underscored that something deeply serious had happened. For local residents, there may also be questions tonight about safety, about what happened inside the property, and about whether there had been any prior warning signs. At this stage, there is no public evidence I found that answers those questions, and it would be wrong to suggest otherwise. Those are precisely the kinds of issues investigators will work through in the coming hours and days. In any fast-moving inquiry, some facts emerge quickly, while others take much longer to verify. That is particularly true when investigators are trying to reconcile witness accounts, medical evidence, and forensic findings. So what are the next steps likely to be? Police will continue interviewing the woman who was arrested, while detectives and forensic teams build a fuller picture of what happened. Depending on the evidence, investigators could seek more time for questioning, release the suspect, take no further action, or ask prosecutors to consider charges. There may also be further updates once formal identification procedures, medical examinations, and scene work are complete. Again, those are general possibilities in a criminal investigation. No public statement I found specifies which path this case will take from here. Another likely development is a post-mortem examination and, in due course, coroner involvement. In sudden or unexplained deaths, especially involving children, the coroner process can become an important part of establishing the medical cause of death and the surrounding circumstances. That process is separate from any police decision on criminal charges, though the two can run alongside one another. At this stage, no public report I found sets out the results of any post-mortem or coroner's findings in this case. It is also possible that child protection, housing, or social care questions could arise later, depending on what investigators discover. But as of now, there is no public information I found that would justify drawing conclusions on any of those fronts. The responsible position tonight is to stay with the confirmed facts and to acknowledge what remains uncertain. The emergency response on Saturday was substantial. According to the London Ambulance Service, crews treated the baby at the scene before taking her to a major trauma centre. That detail matters because it confirms that efforts were made immediately after emergency services arrived. It also illustrates how rapidly a case of this kind becomes both a medical emergency and a potential crime scene. From that point onward, paramedics, police, and later forensic specialists each have distinct roles, saving life where possible, securing the scene, and preserving evidence. Broadcasters and newspapers at the scene later described a cordon stretching across much of Great Peter Street and reported seeing forensic officers working in a third-floor flat. Those details help explain why the area remained sealed off into Saturday evening. They also suggest that investigators expected to spend many hours examining the location. That is not unusual in a case involving a sudden death, particularly where detectives need to document the scene with precision. It is worth repeating that the child has not been publicly named in the official police statement I reviewed, and out of respect for the family and in line with normal practice in a case involving a baby, many outlets have limited the amount of identifying detail released. The woman who was arrested has also not been named in the public updates I found. That, too, is normal at this stage of a police investigation before any charge or court appearance. For anyone watching who may have information, the Metropolitan Police have asked witnesses or anyone with relevant details to contact them and refer to the case number 1596/14th of March. Appeals like that are often brought in the early stages. Information that seems minor to a witness can later prove important in helping detectives verify a timeline or test an account. The language around this story also matters. Because emotions run high in any case involving a child, especially a newborn, it is easy for coverage to become either speculative or sensational. A neutral reading keeps the focus on established facts: where the incident happened, when police were called, what emergency services did, the age of the baby, the fact of the arrest, and the fact that the investigation is continuing. It also avoids assigning motive, intent, or responsibility before that has been tested by the legal process. Tonight, then, the picture is stark but still incomplete. An 18-day-old baby girl has died after a reported fall from a residential property on Horseferry Road in Westminster. Police were called just after 7:30 on Saturday morning. The baby was treated at the scene, taken to hospital, and later pronounced dead. A 43-year-old woman was arrested on suspicion of murder and, in the latest public reports I found, remained in custody. Detectives say they believe the incident happened within a domestic context and are urging anyone with information to come forward. Beyond that, many of the most important questions remain unanswered tonight. As this investigation continues, the next official updates are likely to be crucial: whether police announce any charge, whether more is said about the circumstances inside the property, and whether medical findings clarify how this child died. Until then, the emphasis remains on careful reporting, verified facts, and respect for a family at the center of a devastating event. That is the latest confirmed information available tonight.